Kia ora, everybody. I'm Jemilah.
And I'm Marty, and today we're going to bring you new music from Coldplay. We've got Solomon Cook and My Morning Jacket, among other stuff.
And today we'll look into the new documentary, The Velvet Underground.
Ooh, all that and a whole lot more here on the 13th floor's Uptown Lowdown.
All right, first up, we're going to look at the albums that were released on last Friday. First, we've got Coldplay, which is Music of the Spheres. They keep coming back.
Why?
I mean, they're just a bunch of really, they've just honed their craft so well, I think. Spent so much time on just really knowing, how to crack the code of the industry. But I thought it was quite new age. Some of the names of their songs on Spotify are like little emojis, which I don't think I've seen before.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what that was.
Yeah. And they've kind of got it's very reminiscent of their classic Coldplay sound, but it's got a little bit of a pop ethereal twist with a little bit of rock. And they've done they've got guest appearances from Selena Gomez, We Are King, Jacob Collier, and BTS. And actually, I saw a little clip of one of the songs that they did. I think it is Human Heart that they've done with Jacob Collier and a bunch of other artists live. And it was pretty incredible, layered harmonies and harmonies and harmonies. And that was pretty special. So I don't know, maybe
why don't we listen to a bit of that song?
Yeah.
Then I'll tell you what I think of it.
Cool. Okay, let's play a snippet of that.
Boys don't cry. Boys, keep it all inside. I tried to hide it underneath. Still my heart starts to beat. My human heart only got a human heart. I wish it didn't run away. I wish it didn't fall apart. Oh, my human heart. Night and day and light and dark. Anything could be torn in half. Only got a human heart.
Okay, so that was new music from Coldplay. I got to tell you, I mean, I'm not one of those people that hates on Coldplay because there's a lot of them like that. And I've seen them a couple times. They're okay. They're not my favorite band by any stretch, but I can put up with them. But I hated this record.
Yeah.
I just thought, and I know they got Max Martin, the producer, right?
Yeah.
And he's like the big Swedish guy who does all the pop stuff.
Yeah, very popular with producing.
And the whole idea of having Selena Gomez and BTS on her, it all seems rather desperate to me.
It is quite like I say, they figured out how to hone their craft and do things for the industry. Whether they're staying genuine to what they actually want to do as creatives is a whole nother.
Well, creative is the operative word. Is there anything creative going on here by the band? I mean, they don't sound like a band. They don't sound really like Coldplay anymore. It just sounded like kind of bland disco.
I found the stuff that did sound like Coldplay sounded like Coldplay that we'd heard before.
Yeah.
And I feel like when an artist, I mean, it's hard when you're a big artist like that and your income is music and you kind of have to do what the people
come on,
want.
It's not that hard. Look at the Beatles. Look at the Stones. They crank that stuff out left, right, and center.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But I haven't really heard much from the general public of how they're receiving the album. But
no, well, see, I was kind of even surprised that the album showed up because you didn't hear any hype building up to it.
No.
Nobody seemed to care, and now I know why.
It's kind of like they released that one song, Yellow, that everybody knows, and that's what everyone knows Coldplay by. And I think it's
and that Viva La Vida was a big one, and that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid they're on the downward spiral. I'd like to say. So we'll see what happens. You never know. But I'm not a fan.
It's not, in my opinion, it's not that bad.
I know. That's good.
Cool
Okay, that was that. Now I got a new band that sounds like an old band next. So these guys are called the Georgia Thunderbolts. They're from Georgia. They sound just like classic Southern rock from the 70s. So bands like Lynyrd Skynyrd, Allman Brothers Band, Marshall Tucker Band, Thank God I'm a Country Boy, South's Gonna Do It Again, all that stuff. But the interesting, I mean, they have this one song. Well, we'll play a song for you right now from them. It sounds very much like it. It's called Looking for an Old Friend. This is new music from the Georgia Thunderbolts.
Staring out into the sunlight, I wonder if I'm the only one thinking about the time been wasting. The time has come now to be gone.
Okay, so that was a Georgia Thunderbolts sounding, and their lead singer, his name is TJ Lyle, sounds very much like Ronnie Van Zant from Lynyrd Skynyrd, which is kind of cool in a weird sort of way. The interesting thing about Southern rock these days is the whole Southern, they used to hang Confederate flags back in the 70s behind their things and dream about the good old days of fighting the North and all this. And there were some good records that came out of it, but the whole mentality was a little off. And so that has kind of gone through a bit of a change over the past couple of years with everything else that's been going. So it was interesting to talk to. I spoke to TJ Lyle when the record was coming out just this past Friday and asked about how he's thinking about those classic Southern rockers and with what he's doing now. So here he is. And you're singing. Obviously, you've heard a little Lynyrd Skynyrd in your time.
Oh yeah.
Does the comparison? How do you feel about that? With
I don't mind it at all. He was he's a legend. He's fantastic, legendary songwriter and singer and frontman. I think I'm just honored to be classified to something close. Yep. Have you met any of the ex-bandmates or ever seen anybody of those guys perform? Artemis Powell.
Oh yeah,
we met him, and I think that's all we've met. But he was a nice guy. We played with him a few times.
He was the drummer, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So what did you have to say to him? I mean, it must have been kind of something going on.
He mainly did all the talking. We really didn't ask much. He's a really open guy. We didn't know what to ask him or how he'd be. So he was more open to tell us things than we were to ask him.
So that was Marty talking to TJ Lyle about the influence of 70s Southern rockers on today's music.
Yeah, the Southern rock, it's never going to go away. And it's good fun, but I don't know. I mean, it sounds, like I said, exactly like the 70s. So
I'd be interested to hear your opinion on, do you feel like that, music that was, 70s, 60s, 80s music, do you feel like that has a time and a place, like it should just be left in that time period? Or do you feel like it's worth bringing it back?
Just recreating it is a problem. I have a problem with that because it's like, well, they already did it once. Yeah. And so it'll be interesting. I give these guys credit. They can play. There's some great guitar solos on. They got 2 guitar bands. So, I mean, if I was 21 years old and living in Georgia, I'd want to hear these guys play live because that's, it's loud and they can rock. So that's cool. They just have to develop their own sound now and not be so derivative. But I think they can do that. So we'll see what happens. Okay, our single of the week this week is one from Jenny Mitchell, and she's got a little help from Tammy Nielsen, 2 of our favorites. They've both been up here at the 13th floor. So the song is called Trouble Finds a Girl. It's it's got a something to say. What did you think of it? Yeah,
it was definitely a powerful and direct response to sexual misconduct and sexual assault within the music industry, which is super relevant. We've been through the Me Too movement and Soundcheck Aotearoa, which is created by the NZ Music Commission in response to a lot of sexual assault and stuff that's gone on in the music industry, which is such a shame. But, we're all, the thing about the music industry, and this is what's kind of came to light, is that everybody works in an environment that's often one-on-one. It's often behind closed doors or at bars where you're around alcohol, and we're still coming out of a generation that is sort of a bit male dominant. There's still quite a lot of engineers, producers, recording engineers that are male working with young female artists. And I'm very like as a musician myself, all of the male people that I've worked with have been like so kind and so wonderful and respectful. But exactly, but and I don't think we should have to say thank goodness, like
That's
hopefully
true. It's a shame that
coming
it has
to
to
a
happen.
place where I don't have to feel grateful that I haven't been sexually assaulted.
Yes.
Where I like to create art. But anyway, back to the song, I think that it's a really, really cool message to the world, and the lyrics are really powerful and showing that this is not just something that happens in the music industry, but something that happens to, it's kind of also reinstating that idea of like teach your sons to act better than protect your daughters.
Yeah. And it's nice hearing Jenny and Tammy together. So I think
they're really their voices are just meld together so well. Their styles are very similar, and it really comes through as being a nice thing to listen to.
We teach our daughters which clothes will get the wrong attention, and how to carry your keys between her knuckles in a parking lot.
But all this time we forget to mention we're playing by the rules, but trouble's not.
Well, I think one of them is trying to tour. I think Jenny's doing some dates, so maybe, I don't know if they'll be able to come up here yet, but we'll see what happens. Maybe Tammy will sit in on a few of the dates. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be fun to talk to them about that. Yeah.
All right, time for our film segment. We gave Oxford the week off. He's resting comfortably, but there's a big documentary just came out called The Velvet Underground. It's directed by Todd Haynes. It's on Apple Plus if you want to watch it, and it's a big deal. And before we get into tearing it to pieces or building it up and tearing it down or whatever we're going to do, let's watch the trailer from the film.
That weirdness, it shouldn't have existed in this space.
His music sounded like nothing else. And all of a sudden, it would stop like that, and the audience would be dead silent. The Velvet Underground had hypnotized them.
1, 2, 3.
Lou always was very clear that there's no difference between being a writer of the book and a writer of lyrics.
The artist is not with society. He's different.
I was interested in communicating to people who were on the outside.
They were going to blaze a trail, which eventually they did.
Good evening. We're your local Velvet Underground.
Cool. So that was the trailer for the Velvet Underground documentary that is on Apple Plus today. If you don't have Apple Plus, I'm pretty sure you can get a 7-day free trial.
I'm sure you can. That old trick. Yes. But I've watched this film and I've been a big fan for a long time. Velvet Underground is one of those bands you have to find out about somehow. It's not like the Beatles where you hear them on the radio and you're an instant fan. Somebody has to tell you about them, and then you have to have a little patience and an open mind, and then suddenly it becomes a thing that you just can't forget anymore.
I love that picture that you shared on Facebook of you with
John Cale. It's
so
right.
Cool. I almost couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, oh my gosh, Marty with hair?
Yes, I know that was a big deal. So I have met both John Cale and Lou Reed, who are both very strong personalities. John Cale was doing a show that I promoted in Rochester, and so I got my band to open for him, which was very cool.
Nice.
But he was an interesting character. And then Lou Reed is notorious for being very curmudgeonly especially around journalists. And I was working at MTV in New York City part-time as a quote unquote producer in mid 80s. And I had to babysit him for a couple of minutes. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to rip me a new one. It's just going to be awful. He was a pussycat. He was beautiful. It turns out he has a love of doo-wop music, which I do too. And somehow that came up and we were best friends for about 10 minutes. And then I never saw
be on his good side, it sounds like.
Yeah. But anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about the film. People are raving about this film as being a whole new way of making the best music doco ever. They're not wrong. It's a really good film. Todd Haynes is his first documentary. He's done a film called I'm Not There, which was ostensibly about Bob Dylan, had like 6 different actors playing Bob Dylan, and it was fiction. Catch it if you can. It's really good. And he did The Velvet Goldmine, which is a film, a fictionalization about the glam scene in England in the early 70s. So those are great movies, but they're not documentaries. So everybody was wondering how Todd is going to approach this, and he did a fantastic job. He's got John Cale and Mo Tucker, who are the 2 surviving members of the band, on camera talking about and kind of spilling their guts about stuff that we always wondered about. And it takes a while to get to the Velvet Underground. I think it went for 40 minutes before the band actually formed, but all that stuff was fascinating for us who know all the, the surfacey stuff, and we wanted to dig deep. So it's not for the faint-hearted and it's not for the newcomer, but it's a fantastic film. I really loved it. This is your kind of first exposure to Velvet Underground, right?
Yeah, I've heard of them before, and the Banana is very familiar, and I've definitely going through and listening to some of their work again. I've definitely recognized a few of their songs, not super strongly, but they would have been played maybe in my childhood by my parents, and I would have just heard them in the background.
I can't imagine my parents ever playing the Velvet Underground.
It might not have been my parents.
Hey,
who knows?
Hey, check out that's Black Angel's Death Song. This is fun.
Well, when you just know a song. You don't know where you know it from. You just know it.
Well, there's Sweet Jane is a good, kind of.
Yeah. And I didn't get a chance to watch the documentary because I don't have Apple Plus, but I watched the trailer and read a few sort of articles on it, and it seemed really interesting. I thought it was really interesting how they talked about Lou Reed and his experience with like LGBT community, and how that was sort of like always missed, like kind of looked over, which I guess makes sense because in that time it was definitely more frowned upon than it is now.
Right. And there was a lot of talk about Andy Warhol's factory and the vibe that was there. And they had a woman there who was part of the scene, who's now a kind of well-known journalist and writer. And she talked about the misogyny and how it was all about, when the females' involvement, it was all about how they looked. That was all that mattered. And, so there is that as well, which kind of brings us to Nico, who is the German chanteuse who Andy decided needed to be joining the band at Lou Reed's, it's like, oh, what are we going to do with her? But her tracks on that first album have grown into some of the best loved music that a lot of people.
It's funny how things come about. There's always a different way for different bands, but for those bands that do leave a lasting impact, it's always those funny things that people are sort of drawn to knowing more about and why. So I can totally understand as someone who, grew up around that music, hearing the juicy details is like exciting.
Yes, it is. And it's just great seeing, especially John Cale and Maureen Tucker, the drummer, now 70, 80 years old, just thinking about this stuff, and they're still here. It's still great. I love it all. And I should point out that the Velvet Underground are a huge influence on Kiwi music, especially the Flying Nun scene of the early 80s and all that. And without the Velvets, there probably wouldn't be Chris Knox and all that stuff. So they would sound very different than they did now, or did then. So it's a pretty important record, or pretty important movie, I should say. I highly advise people to go and check it out, and then buy all the Velvet Underground albums. Okay, now for our interview of the week. This is I did this interview with a band called the Courettes, who I'd never heard of before, and they have an album out that just came out called Back in Mono, which is kind of a takeoff on the Phil Spector Back to Mono thing, and there's a reason for that, which we'll get into. But before we listen to the interview, we'll play a little bit of the music from their album. This is a tune called Hop the Twig.
Hop the
Okay, so that was new music from the Courettes. This is so I had a chance to talk to the Courettes, who their sound, as you can probably tell, kind of girl groups and Phil Spector Wall of Sound meets the Ramones and the Cramps kind of thing. So they're very retro, very punky, and they love their whole reason for being is to rebuild Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. so that's pretty.
I mean,
cool.
all you need to say is like put "it's" on the end of a name, and it's instantly like a girl band.
Exactly. So yeah, Shangri-Las are big too in their sound. So anyway, one of them is from Brazil, and one of them is from Denmark. They're a couple. I think they're married. I'm not sure, but they now live in Denmark, which is where they were when I spoke to them. And here they are talking about how they make this music. It's fantastic.
There's something in the sound. For me, the first garage I started listening to was Introducing the Sonics.
Right.
Yes, called Introducing the Sonics.
Yeah.
The Blue album there.
Yep.
And then that was my first real meeting with the garage, because I grew up with my parents' 7-inch Beatles, Kinks, Stones, all this stuff, and so I had a big love in all the girl groups I was listening to also back then as a kid.
It's funny because sorry.
No, you can say a little bit.
No, because we just were invited to a TV channel here in Denmark to talk about Wall of Sound.
Yep.
And then I was just trying to get, what was the first time I heard this music? And I actually was in my childhood in the 80s, and there was a Levi's commercial with this dum dum boom, dum boom, and then it came that voice, and I was like, as a kid, like, what is that voice? It was like heavenly, but with a pain inside, and sexy, but innocent, and it was Ronnie Spector, and I just got to know it was Be My Baby many years after. So it was a big wow.
Okay, so that was my little chat with the Courettes. I highly recommend listening to the whole thing if you love this kind of retro sound. We had a good time talking, and they're dying to come to New Zealand and play at some point. So we'll see if we can drag them down here sometime.
Next up is our up-and-coming artist for this week, which is Solomon Crook. I think we should just jump right into it by playing a snippet of a song called Breathe For You, which is just off his recently released EP, I and You.
See those brake lights, hold the nights, call it out, make it known it's not allowed, burn it down, with your kisses that break through the violence. It's not something that tears you wrong.
Okay, so that was new music from Solomon Crook. I got to say, I've never heard of him before, but he sounded very nice. What can you tell me about him?
He's a Coromandel student, actually grew up in Opotari, which is only really significant for me because I used to go to a wonderful festival called Prana at Opotari for a long time. And he wowed the crowd at Smoke Free Rock Quest in 2015. Placed only third, but 3 years later, he's now based in Wellington and seems to be on the up and coming, which is the whole point of this thing.
I believe it is.
This song Breathe For You is one of 4 songs off his EP I and You, and it's produced in collaboration with Neil McLeod and David Abrams. And it's sort of very soulful and emotional, and I really got captured by his voice and how expressive it was. It was just so raw, and it really felt like he was singing from the heart, and in combination with a sort of more production focus, I thought that was really interesting, and definitely someone to be
keeping an eye out for, huh? We'll see what he does next. Okay, we're looking forward to albums coming out on Friday. I've picked a couple of them I'm looking forward to. First one is by a band called My Morning Jacket. So they've been around for a while, and then they kind of took a break. And then they put out a new album last year. It's called Waterfall. And apparently the break, them getting back together, they were highly they couldn't wait they just kept making more music. So now they got another album out this year, which I think is just called My Morning Jacket. So we'll play a track from it. It's called Complex.
Never could quite see all the complex signs. Never could quite read in between your lines. Never felt quite safe in these complex times. Not quite free. Hey, you get what you pay for. Hey, what are you waiting for?
Yep, that's new music from My Morning Jacket. There's a guy named Jim James is the front man, and he does all sorts of other work with other people. So you may have heard him and you don't even know it. What
That's always the case for me. Like until this year, and now that I'm talking to artists and interacting with it in like a spoken sense, I know the name, but I probably know like 180 artists by sound, but not by name.
Well, add them to the list. My Morning Jacket. I saw them a couple times live, and I remember once they were almost transcendent. They were like Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Like they were just. It felt like I think it might have been at a big day out. I'm not sure, but it just felt like the place was rising. So they have that capability of being really good when they're on their game. So we'll see what the album looks like or sounds like.
Cool.
And then the other one we're going to look forward to is from Tom Rodwell. He's got an album coming out called Wood and Waste. So Tom is a local guy. He usually goes by the name of Storehouse Blues, but now he's going under his own name, Tom Rodwell. And we got a track that we're going to play from his new album. It's called Touch Me Like a Teddy Bear.
Your fingers start to roam. Love me like a teddy bear. Tell me that you really care. Dress me up in silly clothes. You sniff it with your nose. Touch it like a teddy bear. Touch it like a teddy bear. Touch it like a teddy bear.
Yeah, so that's new music from Tom Rodwell. Wood and Waste is the album. So he's heavily into the blues, old Tom. I don't know if you run into him at all over the course of the last couple of years or not. He plays out in the wine cellar quite often. And he's been doing his thing on and off. He goes to the States a lot and kind of soaks in the vibe of Southern U.S. and then comes back and does his thing. And it's pretty cool. Yeah, so anyway. I'm looking forward to the album, and I have a feeling we'll probably be talking to him on the 13th floor this coming week, so we'll hear more about it. So, yeah, I think that's our show for today. What do you think?
Yeah.
Had enough?
Yeah. We run out of content, so.
No, that's enough. Yes, okay, very good. All right, well, I'll talk to you again next week. In the meantime, we'll listen to a little more from Tom Rodwell. Adios.
Adios.
Helium balloon. Love me like a teddy bear. Love me like a teddy bear. Love me like a teddy bear. Love me like a teddy bear.
The 13th Floor Uptown Lowdown is brought to you in part by a grant from the New Zealand Music Commission and by the Uptown Business Association.